All righty. We're going to start this forum today. I'm Gwen Gamble with Sunriver U, supported by the Owner Enrichment Committee, and we are hosting the SROA Long Range Strategic Plan Forum. Today on the forum, we have James Lewis, the SROA General Manager, Keith Caceres, the Assistant General Manager, and then joining us, we have Pam Hayes, a subgroup chair for excellence in governance, Heidi Hansen, subgroup chair for environmental stewardship, and Rich Phelan, the subgroup chair for quality of life Sunriver experience, and Stacy Wesson, the subgroup chair for community engagement. We're going to begin with a presentation from SROA, and then as you have questions, you can type them in the chat. They will come to me and questions will be asked following the presentation. We do have 2 questions that were sent in earlier, so we will answer those 2 questions first. Just know if a question isn't answered, or if you send in a similar question to another question, the wording might not be exactly as you typed it because we combine them to make it more efficient with our time. We will end at 5:30, so we have all this time to see what the long range strategic plan is. Okay, Keith and James. I can't hear them. Are you muted? Uh-huh, they're muted. Okay, so people in the panel, don't mute yourselves. It's very hard to go in and change that. In the future, if you need to turn your volume down so we can't hear you speaking in the background, use your volume control on your laptop. There we go.
Great, thank you. I'm James Lewis, and I'm the General Manager for the Sunriver Owners Association, your association. And we're here today, as Gwen was saying, to give you a kind of an update on where we're going in creating a strategic plan for SROA for Sunriver. And we've called this a 2030 strategic plan. It is a longer range plan, but it's not a 20-year plan like you would see, some communities do. My experience has been when you try to plan for 20 years down the road, a lot of things happen that derail you a lot sooner than that. So we're calling this a 2030 strategic plan. So I would say for the next 7 to 10 years this is what we want to work on, and this is what we want to accomplish. So if we can go to share the screen. We're going to do a screen share here for much of this. So we're going to, while this is being brought up, we're going to try to be fairly expeditious in this presentation because it could get long, but we want to save some time for Q&A. So if you see something here, something we say that sparks a question, feel free to send that question. As Gwen said, as a moderator, they're going to provide those questions to us. So what is a strategic plan? Many of you may know what a strategic plan is. But in the realm that we're working on this, and this is pretty straightforward, a strategic plan is a disciplined effort to produce and guide fundamental decisions and actions that shape what an organization is, what it does, and why it does it, with a focus on the future. What that means for SROA is that for all of our staff, all of our departments, our board of directors, you, the community, all the visitors that come here, we want to make sure that we are accomplishing those tasks. We are fulfilling the service levels and meeting the needs of all of you, the owners, and that we're doing it in an organized fashion. We're prioritizing what's done, and we're doing it in a way that our budget can sustain it. Because again, it is all of you through your maintenance fees and fees you pay, and the visitors that come here that are paying for all of these services and facilities. So, Keith, you want to click to the next one? So I'm going to give you an overview. And some of this is a little history question, and pardon me, if I read from the screen here, but Sunriver is 55 years old. It's a planned community. It's a destination resort. And over that time, it has continued to mature and evolve. And it's vital that Sunriver Owners Association continues to provide exceptional service to its owners and guests while maintaining the $30 million in facility assets. We need to acknowledge emerging trends. We need to provide a safe and modern community for current and future generations. When I think about Sunriver over the last 55 years, and I've lived in Central Oregon for 30 years and been, coming to Sunriver for a variety of reasons. I've done work for the association in the past, 15 to 20 years ago. Worked on the current zoning ordinance back in 1996. So I have a lot of history, and I've seen this evolution in Sunriver. And Sunriver will continue to change. And so what we're really doing, what we're saying here is we're trying to put an organized methodology together so that we're able to adapt to changes that we see in the future. We're able to adapt to changes in the demographics that will undoubtedly happen, able to adapt to the changes in the desires and service levels and facilities that changing demographic wants. And again, we do so in an organized fashion. So in the strategic plan, we're gonna kind of start from the back and go forward. We're going to end up with a document. That's what we're going to have. And the document will not be extensive, hundreds of pages. It's not going to be 5 pages. But these are the elements it's going to have. It's going to lay out, the overview, pretty much what I said, what we're trying to accomplish so that the reader, not just the reader today, future owners, visitors will be able to read this and know what we're trying to accomplish in Sunriver. We will establish, we're going to go through some of this, most of this here today. We're going to establish our mission. We had a mission statement. Our task force looked at that and wanted to tweak a little bit. Through this, we established our vision and our values. As part of this, though, we look back at, what has occurred over the past 4 to 5 years. And we're going to show you a lot of the building blocks that take us to where we're at today. We've done parks, facilities, master plans. We've looked at telecommunications. We'll go into that. It's important that we look at those building blocks and we implement and include some of those elements into this planning as we go forward. There was a lot of work and time and effort. This kind of brings it all together. We worked with our task force. We did a SWOT analysis. That may seem sometimes like an old-fashioned method, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. But every time I go through one of these, over the years, it proves invaluable to the group when you have a group working on this to get them to coalesce on what they feel is important for whatever the project is you're working on. Again, ultimately, as we get into this, we're going to have some guiding principles that we're going to go through today. And those guiding principles are going to be implemented by goals. There are going to be goals to implement those, policies to achieve the goals. And then where I say the boots on the ground, where the rubber meets the road, all of those cliches is going to be the action items. And that's what the task force is working on right now. So we're also going to go through timeline prioritization and then, the implementation of this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith Caceres.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for being here to listen to us present the 2030 strategic plan to you all as part of the task force that's been working on this project really since this past summer in 2023. So the board of directors, there was a presentation made to the SROA board of directors in May of 2023, presenting to them a request for a task force for long-range planning task force, which became known as the 2030 strategic plan. In July of last summer, the board of directors approved the appointment of the task force, and we, as SROA, sent out basically a letter of interest to all owners and asking who would like to participate that had some experience in long-range planning, but also had interest in seeing the future of Sunriver. With that, we had a large response, one of the largest responses we've seen in quite some time. So that means you all are very interested, which is great to hear. And with that, we curled the list down to 30 task force members. And in addition, included in those 30 task force members, one of the goals too was for the other entities in Sunriver that for SRA to collaborate with. And for example, we have the resort represented, Sunriver Resort. We also have one of the property management companies, Cascade Vacation Rentals. We have both our chief of police and our chief of fire. We have the Sunriver Nature Center, the Sunriver Airport as well, participated briefly. And we also have the village of Sunriver. So we wanted to make sure that everyone is represented that had a stake in Sunriver in reference to the 2030 future, the next 5 to 7 years here in Sunriver, to make sure there's a voice and make sure it was heard as we started progressing through each of these task force meetings. So once again, 30 members of the task force. And yes, and then also we had most of those where we set up the task force too. We wanted to make sure there was not only full-time residents, but we wanted to make sure there was non-resident owners and make sure there was owners that actually use their short-term rent their properties, make sure they were equally represented. Because it's important based on the owner survey that just came back. As you all know, there's different percentages of owners in Sunriver depending on which demographic category they're in. So that was really important to have equal representation across the board of our membership base as a complete group. So kind of building on what James had mentioned earlier, how did we get to this point, right, as creating a strategic task force for 2030 for the planning, long-range planning in Sunriver? Well, it started, we've had multiple building blocks over the years, and these are just the past 4 years. So as you can see on the list here, the IAMP task force, the most recent IAMP, and IAMP stands for Infrastructure Amenities Master Plan, for those of you who are not aware of that. We had an IAMP task force that was involved starting in 2012. There was another version in 2017 and a more recent version in 2021. In addition, the Telecommunications Task Force. This is a task force that was developed about 3 years ago. And the concept behind this task force was looking at future telecommunication options for Sunriver. And as you all know, we have partnered with an agreement with TDS Telecom to provide fiber infrastructure here for Sunriver. But part of that task force's goal was to look at, is it best to go with a local company that was already here, such as TDS, or look at building it on our own? And what you all have now is the best agreement going forward was with TDS. Also, there was a recycling center task force. That was also a lot of work was put into that task force, looking at what to do with the current recycling center and what the future recycling plans look like for Sunriver as a whole. There was also a vote sent out to the owners to vote on the recycling center, which was voted down. But what came about from that was with Deschutes County and the carting service that services Sunriver, they decided to implement side yard recycling service, which had not been available in Sunriver up until last about in January, so a little over a year ago. North Pool Construction, so that was another task force, which multiple surveys went out based on looking at the owner's needs for that facility. And ultimately, we built a beautiful facility at the end of 2021. And so this will be the fourth season, actually. It'll be open for the summer. There was also Rules Enforcement Task Force was put into play, and that primarily was tied back to making sure that those owners that rent short-term via the property managers or do it independently through VRBO, Airbnb, that there is some representation and acknowledgement of our rules in Sunriver to make sure that those guests are following those rules. And what was also established was a nuisance rule came out of that, whereas one particular property has more infractions basically, or notices to that property, that property would be flagged, and there'll be some further discussion going forward with that particular property. Also, SROA Vision 2020. So this was actually established in 2012, kind of looking at another version of a long-range plan. And you can see a lot of things you'll see on the sheet would have been accomplished since that time frame in 2012. Part of the reason that was put together was also right at the beginning of Shark being built. So a lot has changed since Shark has gone in to service itself as one of our largest facilities here in Sunriver. There was also a COVID-19 task force that I don't think anyone was expecting this to come up, but we had to put together this task force to make sure we had a plan for proper operations, to make sure it was safe for owners to use our facilities, also safe for our employees, and safe for the guests that were visiting us as well, whether that be through tennis, pickleball, whether that was coming into our buildings, our facilities, but also using all our other amenities as well. We also made a improvement and a big update to the ladder fuel reduction plan. That happened back in 2023 as well. There had been quite a bit of law changes since the initial ladder fuel reduction plan went into play. And so we wanted to make sure we're up to speed there and made some additional updates based on the community need and knowing that wildfire is a significant risk. Also, a pathway master plan update that was done and is still in progress in reference to making sure we identify areas in the community that may need some additional safety upgrades to separate roadways from pedestrian traffic. But also look at some areas like, for example, between Circle 2 and Circle 3, where there's not a pedestrian bike pathway. We are looking at some engineering study we have planned for this year for that section to look at and find out if there's a way we can actually create a pathway there. The difficulty with that location is we don't own all the property that is adjacent to the roadway. So that makes it a little bit of a challenge. And then also we know on the south end of the community along Meadow Road, there's less pathway connection back to Center Drive there, which I know people access quite a bit. So we're working on that as part of the pathway master plan. Also, the IT strategic plan task force that was put into play the past couple of years as well. And the primary goal there is every single piece of SROA where we conduct business with operations, IT touches. And so information technology is very important to how we operate going forward. It goes back to COVID, for example, is a great example. When before COVID hit, no one really knew what the word Zoom meant or what the company Zoom was. But ever since then, we have not stopped. Every meeting we've had, we basically have included a Zoom component. So owners, for example, that don't live here full time can gain access to the meetings as well. We also spent and worked with a consultant to put together a parks and facilities master plan. That task force was developed to really look at all of our amenity offerings we have. And some of those amenities are aging, and we know that. And we wanted to look at what is important to Sunriver owners in regards to our parks and facilities. How can we make those potential investments if needed to, but also upgrade some of the existing infrastructure in a more fiscal responsible way. So that was put together. Consultant was a 90-page report. And most of these you can find on the SROA website. So if you ever want to go look at the Parks and Facilities Master Plan, you'll see that is there. And there were some surveys that were tied to that master plan as well. The design manual rewrite, that task force was put together and we had over 22 meetings over a 20-month period. We took a design manual that had been in place for 35 years and we made a significant upgrade to the manual. 35 years ago, a lot of the community was not built out, and so there was a lot of new construction. But as time went on, as the community continued to get built out, the need for what was being submitted, or the submittals came into our community development department, are more in the lines of additions, remodels, decks, adding hot tubs, those type of things that are smaller projects that actually needed some updating in regards to the language that was in the manual. And in addition to that, we wanted to make the submittal process more effective and easier for owners to submit a project to our community development part and then ultimately to the design committee for a review. We also had a comprehensive owner survey. So the survey, since 2010, we've done the survey. We had one conducted in 2010, 2014, 2017, 2021, and most recently 2024. We just completed that survey at the end of February this year. And speaking with our survey consultant, he's always pleasantly surprised to see how many owners we get to respond to that survey. This year, we had over 2,400 owners respond to the survey, of which about 98% completed the survey, which was great. And we got a lot of really good feedback from our owners, but which is great to see is that you'll be able to go back and look at trends from 2010 all the way through 2024. So you can see how those trends, depending on the questions, whether it's governance questions, whether it's infrastructure, amenities, communication, etc., you can actually see the comparison between what owners feel today and what they may have felt 8, 10, 12 years ago. Also, each year, about every 3 years, we do a capital reserve study. And what we hire a consultant that is extremely familiar with all of our operations in regards to our facilities that have a capital reserve or replacement reserve approach assigned to them. And they are here to look at our facilities, make sure that we're on par with money that's coming from our reserve budget, making sure that we have money in the future to replace those assets when they wear out. So that's extremely important as well. And so overall, you can see there's been a ton of building blocks put together to get where we are today. So with that being said, kind of getting down into more the nuts and bolts of this task force as a whole. So far, the task force has had 9 meetings, which have been great. We've had very strong participation with the task force. And one of the first goals was kind of look at the mission statement. The mission statement had been in place for multiple decades. And the task force looked at it as, okay, is this the mission statement today? Is it the same as it was 15, 20 years ago, or does it need a refresh? And so what you're seeing here is a proposed version of the mission statement. And the very first portion, maintaining Sunriver as a premier residential and resort community, did not change. However, we injected protecting its natural environment, moved it up in the hierarchy of the mission statement, and then vibrant quality of life. And we changed out the word property value for economic vitality. And the reason behind that was economic vitality is more all-encompassing compared to the specific property values. And the task force as a whole felt there was a better representation of the community at large. And so this is the newly proposed mission statement, which is great. It took quite a bit of time to go through this because there's some really key components of the mission statement we wanted to make sure it paid special attention to. And then James, feel free to jump in, anytime you want as well.
Okay.
Also, we spent quite a bit of time looking at developing what are our core guiding principles? What is really important to this community? And so based on multiple meetings, the first few meetings, we really dove into this pretty deep and found out, we looked at excellence in governance was really important because you want to make sure that your financial well-being is put together for the community as a whole, and it's in place and it's intact, and it's going to be there for a very long time. And wanted to make sure that not only fiscally, but you wanted to make sure that you plan properly and you utilize the resources you have and the board of directors leadership to make sure the community stays and maintains its high level of integrity and also communication with its owners. And it's one of the key components, and that's the reason why it was placed as one of the guiding principles. Environmental stewardship, as you all know, basically Sunriver is a destination resort community that is surrounded by wildlife and surrounded by nature and the environment. And we have the river on one side, we have national forest surrounding Sunriver. So obviously it's a key component of the community itself. And it's a reason why a lot of you all are here in Sunriver that live here, whether you live here full-time or also part-time. And what's very important too is that this is a key component, whether it's future fire risk, we have to really pay attention. That's why we have a ladder fuel reduction program. Also, we want to make sure that we have the ability and support from our local utilities in regards to fire, police, also water, sewer. All those things come into play. We want to make sure we have a safe community for owners and guests to live and vacation in. Quality of life Sunriver experience. That's another one of our key pillars. As you all are aware, there's a lot of reasons why people live in Sunriver, and the quality of life is one of those. And what is that Sunriver experience? So as we go through this task force and get further into future meetings, and then when there actually is a presentation to the board, there'll be more detail. There'll be some more detail given out today as well as we go through some of the goals for each of these guiding principles. But that is a very key component. And then last but not least, community engagement. So community engagement is a lot about making sure that we stay connected with our owners, with our vacationing guests that visit here as well, but making sure we engage in the proper way that we can get information out to you, whether it's safety related, whether it's education related, rules enforcement, and general communication about what's happening in Sunriver, activities, events, future ideas and concepts. So the community engagement piece is all 4 of these together are the core guiding principles that the task force themselves established. And with that being said, I will turn it over to Pam Hayes, and she is our subgroup chair for excellence in governance. Pam, take it away.
Thanks. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it. So as Keith mentioned, we had guiding principles. Excellence in governance was one of them. We had a team of 6 people that worked on this. Very experienced team of folks. We had everyone from a partner at one of the top law firms in the state to someone that had run a resort before, to people that had experience in city governments, to people that had experience doing strategic plans for corporations. And so it was a great team to work with. We took the input from the SWOT analysis that James referred to earlier. Plus we were able to take input from the Comprehensive Owners Survey as well. And we came up with 8 goals under excellence in governance that are under this, best practices in governance being the first. Now, what you'll see today are the goals and the policies. And these are the basic structure that will hopefully live on for 10 years. These, if you were coming today thinking you were going to get specific actions out of our team today, that's not what we did for this particular presentation. Many of our groups put suggested actions that we could take, but those actions have to be vetted and approved by the board, etc. So what you see today is just the structure of the goal and policy or policies for each section. So the first one under governance, again, is best practices in governance. This one is around employing best practices in SROA's governance of Sunriver, including in developing and enforcing policies and standards for the community. And our policy is to get educated. Go out and understand the practices of owners associations and comparable communities and consider whether SROA is in compliance with the current best practices for owner associations of its kind, including by setting the policies, ensuring compliance, and those policies and upholding community standards. So that's number 1. Let's move on to number 2. The second was transparency and accountability. This is something that's come up again and again and again. And, part of the reason I joined this task force was so that I could start to learn about SROA. And what I found is everybody within SROA is very focused on transparency and accountability. It may not feel like it sometimes by the owners, but the actions that I saw while on this task force definitely demonstrated that. But it's also a goal that we have to maintain. So we will build and maintain trust, demonstrate ethical conduct, and ensure excellent governance by being transparent and accountable to stakeholders, including owners, partners, and visitors. Now you'll notice owners is capitalized. Keith talked about this and making sure that we have the balance of owners in here. So owners aren't just people that live here full-time. Owners include those full-time people. It includes people that own their homes and don't rent them. It includes people that just rent their homes. It also includes commercial folks as well here in the Sunriver area. So a balance of all those owners. But we also need to take in account of our partners and our visitors. Now the policy will be to be transparent and accountable, ensuring SRA's operations, including governance, policies and procedures, financial management and condition, and decision-making processes are communicated and open to all stakeholders. So that's number 2, transparency and accountability. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3 is owner input and representation. So SRA shall fairly represent the interests of all Sunriver owners, and owner input shall be actively sought out and considered in SROA's decision-making process. So policies around that, there's several. We'll identify and analyze demographics and changes among the owners. We'll identify, maintain, and expand upon existing and future opportunities for owner input and utilize that input to drive fact-based decision-making. in the interest of the owners as a whole. Will solicit and or develop increased and balanced owner participation, reduce barriers to that participation. One example is Zoom, and diversify participation based on current and trending owner demographics, including increasing volunteerism and expanding participation of second home residents and short-term rental property owners. So again, a balance. And then lastly, we'll consider and analyze metrics that reflect owner interests, preferences, and concerns, including surveys, owner forums, master plans, task force studies, and other recommendations. So that's number 3. Let's move on to number 4, fiscal responsibility. This is a key cornerstone to any owners association. But we'll maintain responsible financial operations that prioritize the long-term financial health and well-being of Sunriver, protect our assets, account for the priorities of all owners, and are open and transparent. So policies will practice fiscal responsibility in all aspects of our operations, including careful scrutiny of expenditures, adherence to established budgets, and compliance with federal and state laws and generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP. Will abide by all procedures and controls in the SROA financial policies. And the reason this is a different color and is underlined is that these policies already exist today, and you can link to it and take a look. To minimize risk and management losses, will support the interests of all owners in decisions regarding short-term and long-term infrastructure and amenity spending. And again, be transparent to all owners regarding income and spending decisions. So that's number 4. Let's move on to number 5, economic vitality. You saw this in the new mission statement. We will maintain and enhance the economic vitality of Sunriver. So we'll protect owner investments and property values in Sunriver and strive to maintain and enhance the Sunriver brand as a premium resort and residential community for today and for the future. So very, again, long-term focused. That's number 5. Let's move on to 6. Emergency preparedness. It was interesting when we were working on this one. I think the fire in Maui had just taken place, so it was a hot topic for everyone to talk about. And our 2 chiefs, the police chief and fire chief, really gave us a lot of good input in this area. So our goal is to evaluate and widely communicate effective policies and procedures for safety of Sunriver community in response to and evacuation from the threats and hazards that pose the greatest risks. So we'll coordinate emergency preparedness with the Sunriver Service District. Now, the Sunriver Service District is our fire and police, public works, the airport, Deschutes County, and other relevant organizations and agencies to ensure emergency plans are in place and evaluated. The service district, along with SROA, shall educate owners on and visitors on such emergency preparedness. This education part is critical, and this is something that we really focused on because you can't necessarily just put signs up around Sunriver and say this is the way it is, because you don't know what kind of emergency you may have, what routes may be cut off, what's going on. And so educating on how you get the information, et cetera, is really critical here. So let's move on to the next one. The next one has actually been in place with Sunriver for quite a while, and that's protection from wildfire. So we'll endeavor to reduce wildfire hazards on all lands within Sunriver and coordinate wildlife hazard reduction with adjacent publicly forested lands. So policies, maintain awareness of efforts to regional and statewide organizations and agencies relating to reducing wildfire risk. You know, one of the things we learned through this task force is we can't look at things through a funnel. You know, we have a lot of different partners around that we also have to work with, and with wildfire in particular, that was one of the ones that really stood out. We'll routinely update, and we just recently did, and continue to implement the ladder fuels reduction plan. And then finally, coordinate wildfire protection plans with the Sunriver Service District, Deschutes County, Project Wildfire, the U.S. Forest Service, and Oregon Department of Forestry. There's a lot of players there. Okay, one more. The last is coordination with community partners. We have a lot of them around here that we have to work with. We'll ensure effective coordination and joint action with our regional partners, critical to enhancing security, resiliency, recreational amenities, and quality of life in Sunriver. So we'll optimize coordination and take joint action with key regional partners critical to Sunriver, including identification of areas where goals and activities of regional partners intersect with those of Sunriver, positively and negatively, both now and in the future. So those were our 8. And at that, I'll pass it on to
Heidi will be next.
Heidi.
Yeah.
All right, can you hear me? Is it loud enough?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much. And that was a great presentation that we heard on governance. My group, which isn't actually, I'm just a member of that group, just as a correction. I'm not the chair of the environmental group, but I'm just filling in for Amanda, who couldn't make it today. So our group, which was smaller, just consisting of 3 people, looked at this 3 people who are particularly passionate about environment. And in this area of environmental stewardship, we basically identified 3 broad goals that we needed to focus on: preserving natural environment, mitigating fire hazard, and sustainable practices. So I'll go through each of those. Obviously, there's also some overlap between the different working groups, and it became quickly very apparent that that fire hazard and fire mitigation and all these measures are particularly important and are sort of front and center, given what we've seen in Hawaii and California and Oregon and Washington and all around in recent years. So let me just go to the first one. The first of the 3 broad goals that we identified was to preserve and protect the natural environment for future generations. And this is something that has been identified, has always been there, and not it's a goal that has also come out again as as one of the top priorities in the recent owner survey. And in order to achieve this, the SROI policies must focus, and I would say must focus or continue to focus. We're not saying that these are areas that we haven't, or SROI has not focused on in the past. They're very much areas that have received focus, but we are more or less, we're confirming that they need to continue to receive focus in line with what our owners have expressed as their strong preferences over the years, and again recently in the new owner survey. So to achieve this, the policies must focus on protecting our natural resources, such as the riverbanks, the marshes, the lakes, etc., etc. And we will later on in the task force look at more detailed actions that will go along with that. But this is where you have sort of actions regarding how to better protect the riverbanks, which are being eroded in some places, and so on. Secondly, SRA should also actively promote natural habitats in all open areas within Sunriver and open common areas. So one of the things that we focused on in our discussions was also to see that there are different stakeholders in this. And so one is, what does SRA itself do in all its, in what power does it have over the common areas, for example? What can it do to protect the habitat in those open areas? While secondly, you want to look at what owners can do in their particular areas. And thirdly, SRA development guidelines should promote ecologically sustainable design and minimize the impact on the land and preserve the vistas, etc. So guidelines for development, and those development guidelines will concern both the public land, the open areas, as well as the land that's owned by private properties. So this is the first of the three goals. The second one concerns the wildfire hazard, and as I said, that is similar to what we have already heard from Pamela before as well. Policies to prevent fire danger have to continue to be front and center, or even more so in the future than they were in the past. And this requires a combination of things. It requires knowledge, i.e. communication and education of the importance of this area. And secondly, the interesting point that came up is this, so sometimes you need to strike a balance between, should we could cut all trees and then we wouldn't have any trees burning from when a fire came, but we would destroy our natural habitat. So sometimes there's a careful balance to be struck between how much do you clean up in order to prevent fires versus how much do you maintain in order to maintain our natural environment that we all love. And so policies in that area are crucial. Thirdly, is the whole coordination with other agencies. So it's not just SRA itself. It's also obviously the Sunriver Services District, but it's also the county. It's National Forest, it's Oregon Department of Forests, and so there's a whole there's a great number of different actors in this field. And one of the things I've personally learned in as a member of this task force has been that SRA can do a whole lot, but SRA doesn't work in isolation. It has to work in partnership with a lot of other agencies in order to achieve something. It doesn't have power over all of them. We have many times discussed the relationship with the Sunriver Resort, for example, which is its own agency, and we can't dictate how they are preserving nature versus how we are preserving nature. But so there's a lot of coordination needed, and our policies will need to focus on that as well. And finally, the SRA will prepare the community to respond to actual real emergencies. And this whole response protocol needs to be, there need to be very clear guidance for owners and for everybody on how to handle that. The third of the broad goals in the environmental area is to encourage sustainable practices all around. And again, this has to focus on three different groups: on SOA itself and what it does in its own building. Does it have guidelines as to how to build in a way that you have least impact on nature, or promote sustainable design when SOA goes ahead and builds buildings or roads or pathways, etc. The other part is what do others do in the area, and how do we influence if we can't, if we don't have actual power over others? How can we influence and work with other partners, whether it's the village or the resort or other agencies, to promote more sustainable practices? And of course, what do the owners need to do? So we always need to keep those different groups in mind as we're moving along. And it gets more complex than I had pictured when I first joined the task force. There are great challenges, but I think we're in a good place to face them.
So thank you very much, Heidi. Appreciate that so much. And let's move on to quality of life center experience. Rich Phelan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I wanted to start off with just an appreciation for what James and Keith and the rest of the board members done by putting together this task force. It really allowed the homeowners to have a voice in where the future of Sunriver was going to go and what's important. I think it was great. That was also great timing with the survey as well, too, as another key piece of input into making sure that we're investing in the right thing that mattered the most to the homeowners. So it was a great experience, for our task force. We had 5 people. All of us had a passion for Sunriver. I would say the entire task force has a passion for Sunriver and the quality of life and the Sunriver experience. It was a really hot topic, not just for the subcommittee, but also for the task forces in general. You saw how important this quality of life is by the vibrant quality of life that's in the mission statement. So there was a very big discussion and a lot of interest and a lot of difference of opinions, because there's a lot of different definitions of what does it mean to have the Sunriver experience. And what we tried to do through our task force was to represent all of those through this. In the kind of summary, what we felt we needed to do was maintain what was great with Sunriver, enhance what we felt would continue to deliver the experience and the lifestyle that would better serve the homeowners and our guests, and also continue to make sure that the experience was relevant. As Keith went through the list of what's changed in the last 10 years, there's been a lot. And the next 10 years will be no different than that. So we identified 4 goals for the quality of life and the experience. I'll talk about each of them and then briefly go through the policies. We had to narrow it down. There was a lot of good input. So this is by no means just a brief representation. There's a lot of activity behind it. So the first goal we had was to proactively work to protect and enhance Sunriver's physical assets, integrities, and standards. We have a lot to be proud of here in Sunriver. It's a beautiful place to live, to vacation. It's why people come here. And we want to make sure that we don't just maintain, but we take an action to proactively protect what we have and look for opportunities to increase the values of assets. We also know that there's a high value of the integrity and the standards we have at Sunriver here. And we want to make sure that those are maintained and evolve as well, too, as communities go through transitions. So some of the policies that we had around this, and again, by no means, this is the short list. There's all kinds of definitions and more background to each of them, but we know that people come here for a safe environment. It is one of our core value propositions. Being able to allow kids to go on a bike ride and leave them unattended for hours. That's a value. You don't get that many places, but Sunriver is safe. Pathways are a primary reason why people come here. And we want to make sure that we really protect and enhance those because 34 miles is a unique experience of being able to ride your bike or go on a walk. And we want to make sure that that is protected. We also know, and you heard in some of the other things that are spoken of earlier, is we want to make sure that the rules and the covenants are aware for homeowners as well as visitors, and that we do have the ability to enforce those. And it's not to become a police state, but it's just a lot of friendly reminders. 98% of the people, once they understand what the rules are, will follow them. And it's our job to make sure that those rules and kind of what makes it a great place are aware. We also know that we have amenities that need to be maintained. The shark, the pools, the pathways, the nature centers, etc. We really want to maintain what we have. And then through the survey is going to be a great example of what are the other new amenities that the homeowners want, and how do we make sure that those get executed, and we can go through a process of task force. How can we afford it, and what's going to give us the biggest return to that? The second goal was really a reinforcement and enhance the Sunriver living as, really a community. And what that community means is that people are involved, that what we offer is relevant, and that it's thriving. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that Sunriver in this strategic planning process was looking at what does thriving look like for the next decade? What is that? Who'd have thunk we'd all been playing pickleball 10 years ago? Didn't know that. E-bikes, e-transportation. Who'd have thought about that? So we want to make sure that it's thriving and it's relevant. So some of the policies around that is aligning this strategic plan and our vision and objectives across all of the parties. It truly takes a village to deliver Sunriver, whether it's the homeowners' assets and what we do, the village, the resort, SROA, SSD, business communities close to us as well. How do we make sure that we are aligning what we want Sunriver to be amongst all of our partners? We want to also take every opportunity we can to reinforce and foster the community. A lot of the amenities and enrichment programs just really bring that together. What's kind of interesting is that we're seeing, an increase in full-time residents. We're seeing now more part-time residents, and we're seeing more visitors during the peak season. COVID kind of accelerated. It's okay to be here longer because you can work from Zoom now. And so what does that mean as far as the impact of more full-times, longer stay part-times, and more visitors? How do we continue to develop the community around that? You've heard also in some of the other groups, how do we balance the needs across full-time and non-resident guests, full-times, part-time, and non-resident guests? They're all important to Sunriver's vitality. Remember, vitality was also part of our mission statement. And then we also know that people like to come here and relax. They like the dark skies. They like being able to see deer walk across a golf course. They like to be able to just be a part of nature. I mean, we live in a forest and we want to be here for a reason. So how do we maintain that? The next one is, part of it is a village that, and I mentioned it earlier, that delivers Sunriver. But it also is, it needs to become more of a year-round community. How do we help with the shoulder seasons, which are kind of hard places for some of the local communities or businesses? How do we get through some of the shoulder seasons with, physical activities in the wintertime? How do we make sure that we're enabling that? So how do we increase the Sunriver's value to the owners, the residents during these shoulder seasons? We're not going to do it by ourselves as a homeowners community, but we want an active discussion with all of the relevant parties. And then finally, we know that information and awareness is really critical to the homeowners and the guests. That is how we build the communities. We are informed. So our goal is to enhance the broad awareness and easy access to key information, whether you're a visitor or a homeowner. So some of the policies is how do we distribute some of the community information to reach maximum audience based on need and value. We know the Sunriver scene gets picked up, but I tell you, a lot of people are learning about their world through these things. And so how do we make these more relevant? How do we make our website easier to use? How do we make push based on relevant topics you're interested to you so that you can plan? So those are some of the things on how do we really look at the information flow amongst the homeowners and our guests. And then finally, Keith had mentioned about the great work that was done to rewrite the design manual. There's a lot of great new information in there. It's been updated to be relevant to today's world, some of the changes that are going on in Sunriver. And also there's been some procedural changes as well too, to help improve and really make sure it's a favorable design review experience. And so again, that comes down to how do we make the homeowner community aware of those changes so they can take advantage of those. So that's what we had on quality of life and Sunriver experience.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you very much, Rich. All right, Stacy, community engagement, you're up.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay, perfect. All right, so my group, which started out as 2 of us, there's now 4, great group of people. We had a community engagement, and you will see through some of mine, there is overlap. We've seen it in some of the others as we figured out just certain things tend to overlap in certain categories. But our task with community engagement, and has been mentioned before, we have a large community of full-time residents, part-time residents, owners, guests, all of the things that someone could have visit an area. We get them all. And I've been privileged enough to grow up in Sunriver. I was raised in Sunriver, and my family and I moved to Bend when I was like 16, and now I'm back working in Sunriver. So always been here, and it has a special Sunriver has a special place in my heart. With community engagement, one of the first goals we had was recognizing the criticality of visitors to Sunriver. SRA shall seek to maintain and enhance excellence of guest experience. As you can see, many communities are growing. You've seen with the resorts done out in Caldera, and we want to make sure that SRA and Sunriver continues that for our area as well. And so one of the policies we have is SROA shall work with owners to create a community that welcomes guests and enhance guest experience in Sunriver, utilizing tools, including communication, inclusiveness, interaction, amenities, and activities. Just making sure that when people come here, they feel welcome and they want to come back and spend those lovely tourism dollars in our area and enjoy with their family and make memories for everyone. So, all right, the next one. Goal, SRA shall seek to enhance the sense of community in Sunriver. SRA shall seek to engage owners in social and civic activities and events to foster a sense of a thriving, growing, and sustaining community. So we have a lot of full-time owners here, owners that visit, and we want to find a way to make sure they are feeling sense of the community. It's hard when the majority of the people are renters or vacationers. So the owners that live here full-time, we want to give them that sense of how can they connect with one another. I read fast, sorry, the last one. SRA shall assess opportunities to enhance year-round appeal for Sunriver for owners and guests. SRA shall seek to increase shoulder season and winter appeal of Sunriver to augment economic vitality and encourage increase in year-round residents, whether owners or guests. Again, this is mentioned in Rich's, but I think it's really important as a business owner in Sunriver. It's really hard to gap the shoulder seasons while trying to keep staff fully employed throughout the year so that we can be open businesses with tons of employees. So having some of those off shoulder seasons that can just connect those gaps for not only the businesses, but then also have people visiting Sunriver when it's not as busy, and owners as well would love to have some activities that when Sunriver's slow that they can enjoy without a ton of people around. But that was it. We just really want to get the community engaged, making sure our renters are seeing, having fun being here, and once they follow the rules that they are treated with respect and welcomed as much as all the owners are as well.
Super, thank you, Stacy, so much. We just have a few more slides real quickly before we get to owners' questions. So as you can see today, based on the information that James and I presented, along with our subgroup chairs and representatives, you'll see that the task force, we've developed the goals and policies that to implement those guiding principles, and also put in a proposal for a revised mission statement. But what's next, right? And so the goal is from these policies that we've created from the goals, which came from the guiding principles, is to create action items. And that's truly, as it says there, where the rubber meets the road. It's really important. This will be tied to future fiscal questions and comments and potential surveys out to owners for future infrastructure projects and amenities. It'll also tie to everything in regards to governance, to environment, to community engagement. So each of those guiding principles will have actions tied to each one of those policies that are associated with each. We will prioritize action items and evaluate, as I mentioned earlier, fiscal ability, be flexible. Once again, this is not a prescription, but rather a roadmap. And the reason we say that is it's important to know, yes, this is the plan for the next 5 to 7 years, but at the same time frame, 2 to 3 years from now, something comes up that there maybe is a shift. We want to make sure that we hear from the owners and address that if that is the case in the future. So timeline, kind of getting back to where we were. So as I mentioned in the very beginning, back last spring, early summer, the board received initial concept presentation from James and myself to promote that we wanted to establish a task force for the next upcoming strategic plan. July and August, the actual task force was put together and created by the board. And then we had our first meeting actually on August 29th, was the first meeting of the task force. And we really, the first couple of meetings was a good chance to get introductions out, make sure everyone was aware kind of what our mission is as a task force. How are we going to create this mission along with the guiding principles, your policies, your action items, and then how are we going to present that to the board? And then ultimately, how are we going to present that to the owners? And one thing to add here too, which is really important, is during this process, we knew that there is going to be, we were kind of working right along side by side with the owner survey. So what we've done in the last 2 task force meetings, we've really taken a lot of responses back from the owner survey and integrated it into some of what you've seen today that was presented to you. The goal is to have the final comprehensive owner survey, once again, public forum, and then our initial draft of the strategic plan to be communicated to the board of directors. It says May 2024 there. It could potentially be June. We're really working on making sure that the task force spends the appropriate time needed to get this right, because this is a 5 to 7 year plan, and we want to make sure that we take the appropriate steps to get there.
So I'm going to wrap it up for you. This is James again, and just kind of summarize the key aspects to keep in the back of your head. But before I jump into these bullet points, overall, I've been your general manager for over 4 years now. And I just want to say when I came here, and I think, our task force has experienced this, and I hope all of you as owners have experienced this, is that Sunriver is a well-run community. When I got here, we have a very good board of directors that works together. We have long tenured, experienced staff, and we have a lot of committees, task forces, owners that participate. That's what it takes to make this project go forward. So this wasn't something that just happened when we started this project. But again, in this project, we established a community vision mission. That was first. Established our guiding principles. We developed goals, policies. That's where we're at. Right now, the actions are next, and that's what the task force is going to work on, and that's where we want to hear from you. We have communication with the community. Again, that's part of this reason why we're doing this forum, and there will be opportunity when we get more of a draft document put together to distribute that and get more comment. We give updates to our board of directors every month. We have board of directors included on our task force. So, that when we go to the full board, they know what was discussed. But I think also we have a well-balanced task force, and I think that's important because if we, again, as Keith said in the beginning, we're trying to represent all factions of owners, those permanent residents, those part-time residents, those owners that just own rental property. Everybody is entitled to their say if you're an owner. But also by the task force, what I want to ensure all of you is if you don't have a lot of time to participate, we want everyone to participate, is because of the makeup of that task force, those multiple interests, that community involvement from all those players is built into the task force. That's why we did that. That was the intent. So that right from the get-go, you have a well-balanced task force with lots of ideas from different perspectives. So again, ultimately, it needs to be an implementable plan. It'll shape our work plans, and we will look at how these ideas get funded. And we'll work with our community partners. They'll have a stake to help us complete some of these items. It's not all SROA. We work with everybody. And then lastly, we're always mindful of our fiscal abilities, as all of you are in your own home life, for example. So that's kind of it. We're gonna, sorry that, that took a little bit longer, but I think it's a lot of information that our task force is working on in your behalf. So we'll start some Q&A. Keith and I had a couple questions that, as Gwen said in the beginning, that were submitted, and we're going to answer those, and then we'll hear from Gwen as the moderator. So Keith, you can do the first one.
Sure. Thank you, James. One of the questions that came up was from an owner that lives on the south end of the community, asking some questions about in regards to the pathway connection system, kind of off the Meadow Road and those 15 cul-de-sacs or loops that are down on the south end of the community. And what is SROA going to do in the near future, not necessarily the long term? So with that, the question was, there were some right-of-ways where the access is from the pathway to the roadway is not extremely clear. And is there a better way that SROA can, in the short term, enhance that with whether it's signage, other options to show guests and or owners a better way to stay off the roadway and actually on the pathway system itself? One of the challenges there, and we know that, and that's why it's part of the pathway master plan, is that the connection of the pathways there do not completely provide access for each of those 15 cul-de-sacs. And so that's part of the actual pathway master plan, is to redesign some of that area so there is better connectivity and safety enhancements in that area. Regarding this request from this owner was to create some wood chip kind of access for those right-of-ways that lead to back to the, let's say, passing and or crossing over the roadway. That's something we'll need to look into. That's something that our public works department would also look into as well. Some of the challenges we do have is some of those right-of-ways may or may not be on SROA owned property. So that's something we'd have to consult and look into. But thank you for the question, and thank you very much, and we'll take a look at it.
The second question, it was a two-part question. It had to do with recent decision by the Sunriver Resort to change their membership structure and their fee structure to go to a kind of a semi-private status and to increase their greens fees. And so the question was, the first part of this was, did the resort make these decisions unilaterally, or did the SROA mount any resistance to this decision, which affects so many owners, so many homeowners? And, in short, I've answered this question a lot over the past 2 months since they made this announcement. And in short, even although we talked to them and we were made aware of this right before they made the public announcement a couple days, it's not a negotiation. On that issue, though, the resort's private business. They're like other private businesses in the community. It's separate from SROA. SROA, just being very straightforward, has no legal or other authority to direct the business practices of the resort, except as they may be subject or influenced by the SROA rules and regulations, design rules, et cetera, which, the golf membership and fee structure is not. It's not subject to any of those. So, again, we were made aware of their decision shortly before they announced it to the public. We discussed it with them and the effect on the owners. We talked to them on your behalf and asked if there was a way to maintain a discount for the owners, some other, I think, benefit or continuance of what the owners have enjoyed in the past. And they politely said no, and they're sticking with the structure that they have announced. And so, the second part of this are their ongoing efforts to convince the resort. What I just said is, we can keep, is the path they wanted to take. We can continue to request, but again, we don't have any legal ability to direct their business. It may sound trivial, but it's the same as if in the village, one of the restaurants raised the price of a hamburger to 3 times what it was. We don't have the ability to influence that either. I've been asked the question: is there anything we can do to maybe charge their customers to use the pathways? We don't have those abilities. So something like a retaliation like that would not be fruitful. Many of you don't know we work with the resort on many other issues. They're a large landowner. So, the dredging of the lagoon where the marina and the boat launch are last year, we worked with them on that, both physically and financially. And so there are a lot of things we work on with them. So it wouldn't behoove anybody to seek to penalize the resort for the change in their business structure. So, and again, lastly, they're an owner. They pay maintenance fees like all of you do. It's more maintenance fees actually because they own more property. So they have rights and obligations the same as you do. So again, we asked again. They've held strong to their decision. So Gwen, any other questions?
Oh, yes. So our owners never let us down. Let's go back to Pam. In your talk, did you say wildlife hazard reduction?
Keith,
So Pam,
Wildfire.
we noticed that it should say wildfire, not wildlife. It was
Okay.
a typo.
Okay, just making sure that that was addressed as this is like
Yes.
proposal. We want to make sure we're looking at suggestions.
Still in
fix
draft.
that. We'll fix that. Yeah.
Here's some really good other draft things that have come up. This is in regards to what Heidi shared with environmental things. Should the wording under economic vitality be switched to say residential community and premium resort? I believe,
Which page?
I'm not sure where it came up.
So, Gwen, are you referring to the mission statement more? Because the mission statement reads, the premier
Yes.
residential and resort community.
Residential community and premier resort. It did come in the mission statement. You're correct.
Right. So it's currently the proposal is maintaining Sunriver as a premier residential and resort community. That part of the actual mission statement did not change from what it previously was. Protecting its natural environment, vibrant quality of life, and economic vitality. And so your question is, it sounds like the individual owner asked the question about should that be more residential and then separate residential from a resort? Is that correct, what we're hearing?
That's what they would like you to consider, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And then another question on protection from wildfire. Should it read a wildfire hazard reduction of adjacent instead of wildlife hazard? Wildfire, not wildlife, wildfire hazard reduction of adjacent. I think
It currently reads coordinate wildfire. Well, now it does. It said wildlife a minute ago. Coordinate wildfire hazard reduction with adjacent publicly forested lands.
so it's of adjacent or with adjacent is the real question.
With.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yep.
Okay.
I would just throw out what that's doing is talking about coordinating wildfire hazard reduction within Sunriver with the adjacent forest lands. Something that happens on adjacent forest lands can affect Sunriver. So it's that coordination between the agencies that administer both.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, just a comment on that, Gwen, too. One of the things that, so when we had the fire chief here, it was one of the benefits of having him here is we were able to ask questions. And I leaned over and I asked him, I said, what's your number one worry about Sunriver? And it wasn't wildfire. It was a structural fire. He says, we are at a much greater risk of there being an out of control structure fire here than all the work that we're doing, in the forest. The forest gets a lot of attention. So one of the things, we talk about awareness and rules, there's a reason we're trying to move wood away from homes. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that, fire chief would love to have aluminum containers outside of every home that has a wood burning fireplace. He says that's what keeps him up at night. So appreciate the focus on the wildfire risk. It's real. but there's other things we can be doing to preserve Sunriver when it comes to fire risk.
Yep.
And that's one thing too I want to add is in reference to the updated ladder fuel reduction plan. There is language in there. There's a little bit more strict restrictions on private property due to the fact of the updated plan because of trying to make sure that structure to structure fire doesn't occur in the future.
Yeah.
Well, this is right on that topic. Because regarding the natural environment, is it necessary to clear around trees for fire safety? But the brush clearing goes far beyond this. And instead of taking out all the bitter brush in common areas, could we be leaving some bitter brush for the deer to nibble on? And that's sort of a current issue, but it's also something to address down the road. Anybody?
You know, some of these, I've done a number of these forums now. And oftentimes what we'll do is we'll get some questions and we have to go back to our staff that's the specialist on this, like our natural resources, and we can, provide answers and post them on our webpage. Frankly, with regard to the bitter brush, it's one of the most combustible plants that we have. So that's why the ladder fuel reduction program focuses on removing the bitter brush. So I can offer that to you. There are other things that the deer will eat. We do leave bitter brush kind of like in a strip along the roadways themselves, but on the individual properties through the ladder fuel reduction plan and a lot of the common areas, we remove the bitter brush just because of its pure combustibility.
Okay, here's a question about a facility that we didn't hear anything in the plan regarding, and that is, does the SROA have any input of how airport regulations conform to FAA height and path restrictions, noise abatement, flight paths coming in over the river?
Yes. Since I've worked here for 4 years, I get this question generally in the spring and summer when the flights tend to increase for recreation and just people coming here. They have a flight plan. They're regulated by the FAA. They have to work with the FAA for a kind of a flight path that gets approved. But ultimately, neither the FAA or the airport have any control over pilots once they take off. There is no restriction that says they can't fly over Sunriver. They have I would say it's tantamount to a preferred flight path that once they take off, they bank to the west toward the river, over the national forest and not over, the residential area of Sunriver. I know they have it posted. I know that they distribute that to the pilots. I know that many of them follow that, but there is absolutely no actual regulation that says that pilots have to follow that.
Well, that is interesting. Thank you. Can you clarify the sequence of the completion of the plan, the presentation to the board, and or sharing with owners? And will we have any additional Sunriver U sessions or Sunriver, the scene blasts, etc.? Just how are you going to communicate the process as it progresses?
That was interesting when we, were thinking about when to do this forum. We originally thought about scheduling it a couple months ago, but the key point, I think it was said by some of the participants today, was to get down to the policy level, because the guiding principles, the goals and policies are those things that will live over a period of years. The action items that implement these, some of them we're already doing. I think some of the ideas that we got from the task force, some of those will be new. Some of those will, be ongoing year after year. Some of those will be checked off the list and be completed. So, saying that, we got to this point before we had this forum. Our goal was to get lots of comments, lots of questions, that what do owners, do they think we're on the right path for the next 7 years, that these are the primary issues that we want to address. You know, because that really helps us formulate the action items. What do we need to do to make these things come to fruition? Um, Typically what will happen is, and possibly another forum when we get like a final draft document, but our goal is when we take this to the board of directors, like we said, either May or June, that at that same time, once the board hears it and they're kind of okay with the draft, we release it to the public for comment. You know, here it is on our webpage. Please read it. Please provide comments. We come back to the task force, see if that, you know, sparks any changes to the document. And then we'll make those changes and then go back to the board for kind of a final approval. You know, after those changes, again, I think it's always good on the back end. Here's a complete document to have another town hall forum like this.
Yeah.
And just want to jump in real quickly too. And part of the reason why we scheduled and moved it around to where we actually wanted to hear from you all as owners prior to any action, as Jane mentioned, taking place, because we wanted to make sure we weren't missing anything. And in addition to that too, we wanted to wait till we got information back from the owner survey, 2,400 owners that took the survey.
Yep.
But there are some specific questions in the survey that relate back to strategic planning for the future.
Okay.
And that's the time.
Well, kudos for including building design in sustainability. How are sustainability concepts for operations addressed? For example, is SROA looking at or moving to all electric vehicles, solar panels on buildings, and such?
Oh, Lordy.
Yeah, so
jump in
I'll
first.
real quickly. So a couple things we are working on. We are working with Mid-State Electric to install some electrical level 2 charging apparatuses, devices over at the Shark, hopefully in 2024 or 2025. They are waiting on a grant for them to make sure they can supply us with those chargers for electric vehicles. In addition to that, I am just been working recently with our cafe operator to make sure, you know, the cafe at Shark, the products they use, whether they be compostable or reusable. And so that's really important because some of those of you that have been to the Shark and utilize the cafe, it is very busy in the summertime. And so we want to make sure they're also using recycling cans, et cetera, that can be fully recycled. In addition to that, we do have solar on our Shark facility itself, which we've had solar for years over the atrium of the indoor pool area. And we also designed the welcome building and the member pool to potential, if needed, to have future solar on that building as well. And so we're always looking at ways to, and also Public Works is looking at ways to use materials in certain areas that are more environmentally friendly. We're working with our vendors, et cetera.
Yeah, you know, to continue on that, you know, it was interesting just last week. I was proud of SROA when I read an article that there was another homeowners association that was very, they did not allow solar panels on roofs. So as we did our design manual, we allow owners to install solar panels. We allow owners to install electric chargers on the outside. So those are things typically you see in a design that people look at them that you don't see everywhere that affect the design of a home. But you know, our design review task force and design committee moved to allow those things because it's a trend that, you know, that's why we got the question. So yes is the answer.
Great. All right. Well, we have one more question coming in with the, oh, wait, there's another question here. So we'll have two more questions and then we'll wrap it up. When do owners get to vote on the adoption of the proposed plan, or does it just get left with the board approval?
It's not a vote. This does not go on a ballot to the owners. Again, like many of the other plans that Keith went through, you know, there are things that are directed by our board. We create task forces. It goes through a community review process like we just talked about. Our board takes public comment. You know, we hear from folks during owners forum. The board considers changes, amendments. They take everything they hear. And then ultimately, you know, there's a final draft that is voted on by the board to to approved or adopt, whichever the correct process is for the document. And then we move forward. So it's not a vote of the owners.
Okay,
But again, that's why the well-balanced task force and all of this input.
And it
right.
doesn't mean, though, just to jump in real quickly, it doesn't mean that down the road in the future, if an infrastructure item or amenity item comes up that requires a certain amount of potential funding in the future,
Yeah.
then there could potentially be a vote based on our consolidated plan that would go to the owners.
Right. And it's always good to remind owners that there is a time at any board meeting that they can attend and present any concerns or questions they have in person. Just a nice reminder as an owner, you always
Yep.
are welcome for that. One of the action items possibly could be considering side yard clean green yard waste and recycling for homeowners, just stepping up our recycling to include garden waste as an idea. And then, do you want to
Go ahead.
address that?
Go ahead.
Keep going.
No, that's it. Really, just is that in the plan, green yard waste recycling, and is it a possibility, something that's on a plan?
Yeah, I mean, in reference to, so just so everyone's aware, the side yard recycling that was put into play just over about I guess 14, 15 months ago, was an agreement between Deschutes County and the carting service, which is Cascade Disposal, which has this service territory. They were the ones that implemented that agreement and provided that opportunity for owners for side yard recycling. That also included glass recycling at the side yard. It did not include yard debris. And that is something that, SROA does not necessarily have the influence to say to the carting company or Deschutes County, here's what you should provide for our owners. But we made plenty of suggestions early on as well about ideas where either an opt-in service or they decided to go with a full blanket service for everyone paid for that service, whether they used it or not. So we don't necessarily have all the influence to make that decision for them. But we know, currently right now, SROA, if you bring certain, debris to the edge of your property line, SROA multiple times a year will come by and pick up that debris. But it's something that James, you can refresh my memory. It's something that I don't remember speaking with.
Well, to build on what Keith was just saying, in relation to the ladder fuel reduction, that's if you bring it to the side of the road, SROA Public Works staff will collect that. We won't collect big piles of pine needles and pine cones. It's really kind of the woody debris resulting from the ladder fuel reduction.
Right.
And in Sunriver, during the recycling discussion that went on for a while, I don't remember this ever being brought up. And I think part of it is not saying people don't have gardens in Sunriver, but Sunriver, due to the climate, is not necessarily the gardening mecca of Oregon. So I don't mean that people don't garden, but it's something, we could bring it up with the Cascade Disposal, the carting company, and see if it's something they would be interested in providing.
Oh, we're including food waste in that garden waste. So that's like a compostable bin.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
We want to thank the long-range strategic plan group for their great work. And it's very important that we also thank all the participants who tuned in today. Being an educated community is part of what helps us progress as we move forward. And share what you learned today with your friends and neighbors. And please tune in again. I bet in the future we'll have another forum on this topic. So for everybody, have a great evening. Thanks for tuning in. And thank you for all your input from the strategic long-term planning team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.